welcome to our online Salon Series presentation tonight. I'm so happy that you have joined us tonight to hear from our presenters. My name is Nicole Tainch, and I'm the manager for the McDowell Foundation. We fund teacher-led research here in the province, such as the projects you will hear about tonight. I wanted to welcome you tonight on behalf of the foundation. I would like to start by acknowledging that I'm currently on Treaty 6 territory at the traditional lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and homeland of the Métis. I appreciate and honor the relationships with one another that allow us to share this land and continue to work towards reconciliation. I know that we have people joining us from other territories, so I hope you're able to take a minute tonight to consider your own relationship with the land and the people who live, work, and play here. I would now like to introduce Alan Robbins, President of the Northwest Teachers Association, to bring greetings.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. So yes, my name is Alan Robbins. I'm the president of the Northwest Teacher Association. I'm very happy to be able to be here to hear from Seleste Eftoda, one of my colleagues, as she kind of took on some research that has to do around teacher wellness, which I believe every teacher on here can understand. In the last 5 to 6 years, we've really felt that word teacher well-being, teacher wellness has become a huge thing for us. And as we know, even with things going on currently now with intensification, class size, and complexity, more and more, it is important for teachers to be able to take care of themselves. So we are our best when we are trying to teach our little ones. So thank you everyone for coming, and I can't wait to hear some more.
Thank you, Alan. I will now like to introduce our moderator for the evening, Connie Molnar. Connie is an associate director with the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation's Professional Learning, and we are so thankful that she's offered to moderate tonight. Welcome, Connie.
So much for having me here this evening. I'd like to welcome the research team, our panelists, and all of our participants. I myself personally, as a teacher and in my role now, working in the professional learning unit at the STF, have found so much value in the research of the McDowell Foundation when I think about all of my time in the classroom and also my time as an associate director doing professional learning with other teachers. There have been so many times where exactly what we were looking for was part of a McDowell project, and it helped myself in the classroom. It helped our participants in our sessions. And so I just want to say thank you so much for being willing to take the time and the energy and the brain power to do this work, do this important work so that teacher research based here in Saskatchewan is ready for teachers' use when they need it. Before I turn it over to the researchers, I also want to just quickly go through a few technical things before we get started. So anyone who would like to ask questions or make a comment, you can use the question and answer feature that's just at the top of your screen there. And once you go into that screen, you'll also see other people's questions and you can vote on them. So if your question is the same as someone else's and you want to just vote on it, that'll just progress it to the top of our list. So we make sure that we answer it first. We also invite you to just raise your hand if you'd like to speak later on. Or at the bottom, sorry. Sometimes on your screen, the vote's at the bottom. Jay's just reminding me in the background. Thanks, Jay. I appreciate you. Also, if you'd just like to speak and ask your question orally at the end when it's time for questions, please feel free to do that. We'll be recording tonight's session for those who are not able to attend, and you will be able to see it on the McDowell website. As I mentioned before, Jay Salkin is here from the STF, and he has kindly joined us to help with any technical support. So if you hear me mention Jay and you see his name, he's the guru who's keeping all of the things going in the background and problem solving when we need him. So thanks so much, Jay, for being with us. And now I'd like to invite our researchers to first introduce themselves each and then share their work. And once they are done presenting, we'll have that time for questions and for those conversations.
Good evening. I am Seleste Eftoda, and I was the lead researcher on this project, and I have my friends and colleagues with me here as well. So you want to go ahead?
Sure. My name is Amy Campbell, and I'm a grade 1 teacher here at Lakeview Elementary in Meadow Lake.
Hi, I'm Ashley Oystrick, and I work with Seleste as well. I'm a part of the Following Their Voices team, so I've been a classroom teacher as well, and I get to work with her in that aspect.
Yes, both of these ladies were really paramount in helping me start the research and running ideas and questions and things like that by them. So I was really grateful to have them part of my team as part of my team. So just to start the presentation tonight, I would also like to start with a land acknowledgement. Well, I know that's already been done. There's a few little things I will share from the area that we're coming from here. So as we gather here today, we acknowledge we are on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respect to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place and reaffirm our relationship with one another. In Meadow Lake here, the first permanent settler of this area was actually Métis, and his name was Cyprian Morin. And also we live very close to a First Nations called Flying Dust, which is also known as Kawapakanam. I didn't quite pronounce that properly, but which means the man who runs so fast that he leaves dust behind him. So, and this particular area was chosen because it's located close to the Meadow River. So this is an area of the province really rich in Indigenous history, both Métis and First Nations. Thank you, Nicole. So the title of this study was Understanding the Perspectives of Teachers Who Regularly Engage in Physical Activity and Implications on Teacher Well-Being. The photograph that you can see in this slide is significant to me. It was taken on a family holiday where myself and my husband and our 2 children, we went on a hot holiday for our first time. We went to Mexico last year. And I woke up really early in the morning. I think it was about 5 a.m. or something like that. I wanted to beat the sun up. I wanted to see the sunrise and feel it coming over the horizon. And when I was running across the beach, I did feel the sun come over the edge like that. And it was a heat that was so strong. You just felt it immediately. But afterwards, when I was looking at this photograph, it reminded me of something I had came across in my research, which stated, it was a Sufi saying, and it stated, "The body is the shore on the ocean of being." And I guess it's just how I had come to understand the body, that it acts as a barrier or a protective layer and a buffer against the challenges and the stressors and the demands of life. And if we can build up that shore, build up that body, it offers us a layer of protection from those things. So that is the symbolic representation that I see in that photograph. So just a quick overview of the presentation tonight. So I'll talk a little bit about who I am. We'll get into a little bit of what the literature says about teacher well-being, the design that I used for this research, the findings that I came across, and the implications that resulted from this study. So who am I? I initially state that I am Métis, and I do this for several reasons. One, it's an identity that I can claim now without having this sort of unexplained shame that I felt as a child in identifying as being Métis. I no longer feel that way. I think time has changed. I hope for many people it has for me, where I can say that with pride. And as well, I also mention it because I hope that in identifying as Métis, I can perhaps offer some inspiration to other people who are Métis and provide a positive role model for Métis youth. And also, if you had read the research, you'll notice that there is a lot of Indigenous knowledge incorporated into the literature. And that was done deliberately because I truly do value the knowledge that Indigenous people share. And I knew that in order to include it, I was going to have to make a deliberate effort to do so. So I consider myself having worked in, if you see the map here in the photos, you'll see a little blue dot. So that's Meadow Lake. And before, I had worked up at Clearwater River Dene Nation, which is still about 350 kilometers north of Meadow Lake here. And both of these communities I consider to be communities in healing. So they are communities that have suffered from the damage of the residential school experiences and policies that were put in place to destroy the livelihood of Indigenous people. And as a result, there are First Nations who have had major challenges because of this, and it has impacted their health and their well-being. And working in these different environments has been where I have spent the majority of my time teaching. And in this environment, as well as at Clearwater River Dene Nation, often days can be trying. I remember in my first year of teaching, it was often, I would go home at the end of the day, in tears and feeling a lot of stress and wondering how I was going to last, for another 29 years of teaching. And a lot of that stress came from the job itself. And it was also just hearing about, some of the traumatic experience, some of the students that I had working with and how that affected my emotions. And I realized that in order for me to serve those students, I couldn't focus on the emotions that I was feeling because these emotions weren't actually helping children. I needed to find a way to manage these emotions and deal with the stress and the trauma and things like that I was experiencing so that I could continue to help them. And I found the best way for me to do that was through engaging in physical activity. It just gave me a release, gave me an outlet. It was during that time that I trained for a full marathon and, spent a lot of time just getting out that stress and letting it release there and recognize that was helping me to be a better person and a better teacher for the students that I was working with. The other photos here are just some photos of my family. We like to go on canoe trips in the far northern parts of Saskatchewan, trying to get to places where not very many people have been. We also enjoy cross-country skiing. There's lots of great trails here around Meadow Lake. And this past year, my husband and I completed our first, well, not his first, sorry, my first triathlon. And our kids were there to cheer us along all the way. So you can see it's a big part of my life and my husband's life, who's also a teacher, and our children's lives. So it's very important to me. So as the literature suggests that Tchaikovsky and Walker, as well as McCallum and Price, say both. So what they say is that, we need to be responsible for our own wellness. We certainly have agency over our well-being, but they also say that the school ecosystem is really tied to the well-being of the teacher. So you'll see throughout the research that it becomes that, we have these internal factors that impact our well-being, but there's also external factors that are always at play as well. And that really, you'll come to see that in the conceptual framework that I'll share later on in this presentation. But while there is no one definition of well-being, we can understand it as a balance of our mental, spiritual, social, emotional, and physical domains. And when one of these areas is weakened, it's our structure, our framework of well-being is no longer in balance. And sometimes that can lead to burnout. And sort of the opposite of that, I haven't named it as like happiness or content or success, because I don't believe that is really a realistic goal. So I've termed it as healing, because there's always going to be continuous stressors coming at us as teachers. We're going to have our own traumas that we experience in our own life, as well as the vicarious trauma that we carry with us through the experiences of the students that we work with. So it's always this this mode of healing, and then of course, you may get hurt again, and you have to find another way to heal from those experiences. So the purpose of this research was really to explore the perspectives of teachers who engage in physical activity and the implications it would have on their well-being. And again, while I explained my own experiences and how I, used physical activity to help myself, I found that it was sort of this topic that was like a little bit off topic. Like you couldn't really talk about your engagement in physical activity, at least I found with too many people. It sort of seems like this area that nobody really wants to hear that you had a great workout, or that you worked out that morning, or you're going to work out that evening. doesn't always make for great conversation, and especially if other people aren't interested in that type of thing. So I actually didn't really know what the experiences of other people were. How was physical activity helping other teachers, until I got into this research and started talking more and more, and found a lot of the experiences that they shared, especially even the two ladies that are sitting with me here today. You know, it was kind of like, well, that's exactly how I feel, or that's what it does for me. So I was curious to know, was that the similar kind of experience for others? The research question was really, so what are the perspectives of teachers who engage in regular physical activity in a rural school division in Canada? And what were the implications on their well-being? So what are the implications of physical activity on those different domains of wellness? And what are the external and internal factors that influence one's intention and ability to engage in physical activity? So the methodology I used for this research was a case study approach, a qualitative case study approach. I had 8 participants from kindergarten to grade 12 teachers. 4 of them were male and 4 of them were female. It just worked out nicely that way. And these were participants who had to be engaging in the recommended amount of physical activity, which is 150 to 300 minutes of moderate activity, or 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous activity. That the data collection consisted of interviews with all 8 participants. They were also tasked with writing, with like personal documents such as writing tasks, sentence stems, and they also completed a word art activity. In addition, I collected some documents from the school division, and all 3 of these different data points were compiled to find different themes that existed amongst them, and that was in the data analysis stage. So for that, I'm not going to get into too much detail, but if you are interested, you are certainly able to send me an email and I can explain further. But it was basically a 4-stage coding process that was used to take the words and that the participants had shared, and really condense them and find the themes that existed across all 8 participants, and the strongest themes that came through from what they shared with me. So the findings were really, these 4 were the 4 biggest themes. And so the first one was just, it was really found that engaging in physical activity helped the participants mitigate the challenges of the profession. So although they recognized that teaching was stressful and it was time consuming, and it placed a lot of demands on them, all of the participants had indicated that. They said that engaging in physical activity was really important to them, that they had to ensure that they centered themselves. They felt like they did this so that they were able to help other people. And it helped them to withstand the stressors of the job. And they hoped that it would also set them up to have a healthy future going forward. They felt that it also helped to heal themselves, that when they engaged in physical activity, it just allowed them to clear their minds, sort of give them a reset, to let go of the stress that they experienced that day, to interact with people in a more positive manner. And they also shared that in order to mitigate these challenges and engage in physical activity, they really had to have self-discipline, that they engaged despite any kind of barriers that could sort of come their way, like COVID or a holiday, or they're away at their parents' place. They still said that they still continue to engage in physical activity because it was so important to them. And they also said that it allowed them to have an interest outside of their job that they could focus on. So that was also a way that they could mitigate and help to mitigate the challenges of the profession. The participants said that it had a positive impact on their relationships. So they talked about how engaging in physical activity helped them to be at their best for their students, that their mood was improved. It helped them to be kinder. They felt like it helped them to be more receptive to students' needs, that they were more present when students were talking to them, because they didn't have all of this extra sort of their own stress on their mind, that was freed, and then they could listen actively to the students that they were working with. They also talked about many of the participants were coaches or engaged in physical activity with the students. One participant in particular was, she had been teaching for over 30 years, and she said she still engages in the gym games with the students, and they just love her for doing that. So she felt like that had a positive impact on her relationship with her students. And they also talked about how it improved their own personal friendships. So they might engage in physical activity with colleagues or with other peers and friends, and that was an opportunity for them to socialize with others. And others mentioned how physical activity actually offered them an opportunity for solitude, so that it actually gave them a break from people, and they liked to do it on their own. It was their time for themselves. Many participants also spoke to how they engaged in physical activity outdoors, and this gave them an opportunity to build a relationship with nature. As well, they felt it enhanced their professional competencies, so they felt like it had increased their presence and their ability to self-reflect. That when they were engaged in physical activity, they actually had to be present. And many of them identified this as like, if they weren't present, it could result in injuries. So they really had to be present in the act of physical activity. And that this led to decreasing their stress and allowing them to be more present with interactions with students and their colleagues. And a lot of participants actually mentioned that when they were engaged in physical activity, they sort of had these breakthrough moments. Like they would maybe considering some issues they were having in the classroom, and then during the moment of physical activity, they would think of a solution, or it would be shortly after the act of physical activity, they would come up with a solution to the problem that they were experiencing. So it had that ability to enhance their cognitive functioning too, in that sense. It enhanced their professional competencies, as many participants had stated that it helped them with emotional regulation. So when they weren't engaging in physical activity, let's say a few days had gone by for whatever reason, that they didn't have as much patience and they were more easily frustrated and irritated. Whereas if they were engaging consistently and regularly, they were more calm, positive, and patient with the students they were working with. And they also talked about how it increased their energy levels and mobility, which they felt was important to their job as a teacher. So it gave them more strength and stamina throughout the day, more energy. They had a better sleep, and they were able to move around the classroom or the school with greater ease. So some of the systemic barriers, the final finding that they had identified to optimal physical activity. So they had said that, well, leaders did stress the importance of taking care of oneself, that they didn't really feel like it had an influence on minimizing any barriers because the demands of the job were the same. So because nothing was really taken away or nothing was decreased, it didn't open up their opportunity to engage. Although they still did, they just said that it was difficult at times, with different demands that were placed on them, and that, yeah, while they appreciated the dialogue about taking care of oneself, there was no actual concrete actions to allow for that to happen. And they also talked about that they would like some of the ways that the barriers could be removed was potentially increasing prep time to allow either more time to get work done in the school days, so that would give them more time in the evening to engage in physical activity, or being able to use their prep time to engage in physical activity. Some had asked for potentially a possible exercise space or an area for reflection, and they were hoping for more access, like greater access to counselors for students and for themselves. So I won't go into too great of detail explaining these conceptual frameworks. They're quite small here on the slide, but you can find them in the document itself. But I just wanted to point out that the conceptual framework had been revised based on the stories from the participants. So in the first version of the conceptual framework, where you see all 4 domains sort of evenly spaced, this changed into the revised framework, where I actually moved the physical domain to wrap around those other 3 domains, the social, emotional, mental, and spiritual, because as I mentioned earlier, it really just sort of acted as a shield and acted as a barrier and a buffer to protect the self, which is at the center of that conceptual framework. And also, as we have come to understand that, like, this previous framework where you see the four balanced equally, this really is based on sort of ancient, models of well-being. And, even going back 100 years from ago, you would have seen people having to engage in physical activity as part of their life. So they wouldn't have necessarily had to plan it into their life. It would have been something that happened as part of living. And now so much of that physical activity that would have been part of our life in the past is no longer there. So, we don't really have to move if we don't want to. So the only way we're going to be able to address that physical domain of our well-being for many of us is to actually deliberately add it back into our day. So that's why it has been re-added in around the outside, as well as acting as that barrier and buffer to protect us from the stressors of life. And also, if you look at the middle of that revised model, you'll see centering the self, which became a very important theme that arose, and having self-discipline in order to continue to engage in physical activity. So the implications from this research are that I hope that there has been value gained from the perspectives that have been shared by the participants. Hopefully the audience of this research will find something that they can apply to themselves. It had been found that physical activity did have a benefit on students, how it increased the patient's presence and positivity of the teacher, as well as increasing those positive relationships. So teachers may consider using physical activity to enhance their relationships with students, and school divisions and the government might consider how they may support this development. Stress and time was also an implication. So yes, teachers in this study did recognize stress and time as a reality, but they engaged in spite of the stress they were experiencing in the little time that they had. And they felt that engaging in physical activity led to a decrease in the stress and actually increased the time that they had, because it increased their energy levels in order to do some of the work. And also the lifelong engagement and role modeling. So with that, many of the participants had identified that they had engaged in physical activity, even as children, and had carried this into their adult life. So it kind of just speaks to the importance of making sure, we are being good role models for the youth, in hopes that they can carry these good habits into their own adult life and see the positive benefits that come from that. And the participants did say they felt a very important purpose of their job was to provide that positive role model for students. And considering, the sedentary lifestyles that we see growing, that there's an epidemic really for sedentary lifestyles, it's important that students do see this type of role modeling for their health. As well, the motivation. So often when people think of exercise, they'll think of their motivation is really for weight loss, but none of the participants spoke about the idea of weight loss as their motivation. They actually talked about how they were motivated to engage in physical activity as a method of stress management. And so I think when we're thinking about how to motivate people to engage in physical activity or exercise, that we really speak to the benefits that it offers our health on a holistic level, rather than this idea of weight loss. And finally here, this is the closing slide. So you'll see a photograph here again of my children on the canoe trip that we did last summer, which was in Coghlan Falls. It's a beautiful lake that runs east to west in the northern part of our province. And the lake ends at the Canadian Shield that you can see here in this photograph. And there's a series of falls that falls 28 meters over 4 sets of waterfalls. It was just absolutely stunning, just a beautiful, absolutely beautiful trip. And there wasn't a moment that went by on that particular trip where I was just so grateful that I was physically able to engage in this activity with my family, with my kids, and they were able to see these beautiful sights, and we were able to be outdoors connecting with nature. And I do recognize again that, and it's explained in the conceptual model in my document, how it looks like, it's meant to look like a bit of a snowflake, and that's to recognize, the fragility of our well-being, that, there are just, almost any sort of event that could happen that could compromise one's well-being. And, I'm just so grateful for having this period in my life where I am well enough to do things such as this. That teaching really is a work of the heart. It is a job where your emotions are always going to be, part of the essence of the work that we do when working with children, when we care about them and love them so much and always want the best for them. I think we can think of our body as a method of protection for ourselves, as a layer that we can build and strengthen, and that can help us continue the work that we do. I think we need to think of our well-being as a collective responsibility, that there are those external factors that really are at play and can affect our well-being, but also recognize that we do have agency in our own well-being, and we can take steps to improve it, and the importance that we do that for our own self-care. So I do appreciate everyone's time, and thank you for joining this evening. I look forward to the questions and the discussion that follows. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Celeste, for that presentation. There was certainly lots to think about there and lots of connections I was making while you were speaking. We're going to open things up for questions now. If you have a question, you can raise your hand and we can turn on your mic so you can ask it, or you can also type it in the Q&A, which you can access either at the top or the bottom of your screen. So I'll just open it up right now for any questions from our room. All right, our first question from Karen is, if you were to expand your study, are there any areas you would like to dig deeper into?
Thank you for that question. There were a couple. So one area that came, that I thought about after that I wish I would have asked more questions about was the teachers had indicated that they were hoping for an exercise space, as well as more time for counselors, additional prep time, which I think is understandable, and a space for reflection. So I guess I wish I would have asked more about what was it about the school itself that they felt wasn't an appropriate space for exercise? Was it because they didn't have an access to change rooms, private change rooms, or showers? Because we do know that schools typically have gyms or enough space to engage in exercise. So what was it about the space that they felt wasn't appropriate for them? So that's something I wish I would have asked more questions about. I think it would also be interesting to know. So I had interviewed teachers who do engage in physical activity. There certainly could be a large study done concerning teachers who don't engage in physical activity, and what do they feel their reasons are for not engaging. So I think those would be a couple areas that I think there could be more research done and more questions asked.
I will open it up again. Are there any other questions from our attendees this evening that we would like to hear a little bit more from the panel? Think that I have one that I would like to ask personally. So when you were talking with your participants in your study, sometimes you had mentioned those who maybe aren't engaging in activity as much. Sometimes it feels daunting for some people. And so when you were doing your study, did you get some ideas from your participants about how they make that time, because teachers always feel like we don't have enough time, how they make the time or find the time, or how they work it into their lives? So how did that work in terms of your participants, and does that give us some insight that we can share with others?
I am just going to open that up and see if either one of these ladies would like to share something from their own lives about how they manage that.
You can go first.
Okay. So for me, it is something I put right into my schedule, and I make it a priority first thing in the morning, because I know the power that time for myself has on the rest of my day and for my well-being into the evening. So I do feel like having that discipline is a big factor for myself, and I know how much it does for me and my students.
For me, it was a little bit of trial and error. I was doing evening group classes, and I was finding by the end of the day, after a full day of teaching grade 1, it had become a chore and not really something I was looking forward to, because I was exhausted. I was ready for bed by supper time. So I just kind of had to reevaluate that maybe this isn't working for me, and I decided to shift my schedule and be intentional about waking up in the mornings and doing it before school. And that was so powerful to me. It just completely changed my outlook on the day. It gives me that time to kind of think about the day as I'm exercising in the morning, and it energizes me, as Celeste said, was a common theme with all of her participants, and it really set me up for a successful day. And on the rare days that I don't get up and do some physical activity in the morning, those days I find I'm so sluggish, I am tired, and it's a drag to get through the day. So it really has become a part of my routine, not only on work days, but on weekends as well.
Thank you so much. Celeste, are you going to add anything here?
Oh, well, for myself, I've gone different places too. For me, it's just not become an option for myself. It's sometimes I do grant myself days off, and sometimes I need those where I'm just like, nope, today I'm not doing anything, and I plan that. That's going to be my day off. But I guess I kind of approach it like it's a job, or at least it's part of my job. I don't always look forward to it and enjoy it, but I always feel so much better when I'm done. And because I know I'm going to feel better when I'm done. That's kind of my motivation when I get into it. Is you don't really want to do it right now, but you'll be glad you did it, and you'll feel better after. So that's kind of what gets me going.
We have a couple more questions now in our Q&A queue. So the first one is from Ellen. I know this is about teacher well-being, but I can't help but think about the connection with students and their well-being. Are there ways physical activity could be connected to curriculum, particularly at the more senior levels, to benefit both teachers and students? Or would mandating it, do you think that would defeat the purpose?
So sorry, Alan, are you asking about the children engaging in physical activity and the benefits for them? Do they still not have to take gym in high school anymore? or I'm sure they must, but I don't think, from what I hear, sometimes at the high school level, even though they do have gym class, they're not necessarily participating or engaging in physical activity. And that's where I think it really, I think that's what really comes down to this idea of not just teachers, like teachers, really important that we as teachers become good role models for students. But I also talked about the importance in my recommendation section of really trying to increase the health of our whole communities. Because I think when children can see, their parents being active or other members of the community being active, from a young age, that those just become healthy habits, that just becomes something that they do. Now, if you haven't done that, as a child and then into your teenage years, you're most likely not going to understand the benefits for yourself, how you feel or want to or feel confident to engage, as a young adult. So I think it's extremely important for all of our health, for our health as a community and as individuals.
We have another question in the Q&A for you. This one's from Adam, and it says, did you feel like there was any connection between stage of career and the perceived benefit for participants?
It's an interesting question. It was actually all over the place. Like, some participants had like basically their first year. They were like, some had told a similar story, how they had a mentor that kind of said, this is a tough job and it's not going to get any easier. And so you have to get better. Like you have to find a way through this. And so it kind of seemed like for many of them, it was that first year where they were like, I've got to do it. Like, otherwise I'm not going to last. And there was an interesting one, the one that had been, she had been teaching for many years, like 30 some years, almost 40 years she had been teaching. And she had actually relatively new had come to engaging in physical activity. I think she said consistently for the past 6 years. So I thought that was interesting how she had, and then she just talked about all of the positive benefits that it had for her as a teacher, and even as a wife. She talked about how she just had more patience with her husband, and but it was just it was kind of, there wasn't really a theme there. There wasn't really something I could pinpoint to say it was one way or the other. Everybody kind of had their own story, but many had, it seemed like the majority had recognized early on that this was something they were going to have to do.
Thank you. I have a kind of follow-up question for Ellen, asking about that potential of some joint physical activity with teachers and students, and like your thoughts about the impact that might have in terms of relationship building and mental health protection for both.
I think I'm going to just put it to these other ladies, because I know they both engage in physical activity with students as well. So if either of you or both would like to share.
I have the elementary perspective, but I know just we actually, the three of us, offer many committees that involve physical activity. So we have our Fit Kids Club that runs at noon. We have our cross country running. We're about to start up another year of marathon where we are running with students again, and just the relationship building that comes from that, and seeing the students, we're not asking them to run, we're running alongside them. So I think it's really great. And we have the kids who are eager to come, and they're eager to bring their new friends to join these clubs with us. So I think at the high school level, there can definitely still be the same enthusiasm. I think it gets trickier where you have your athletic superstars and they are the ones who are engaging in a lot of the activity. So it maybe can be intimidating for those students who don't see themselves as the athletes to take that step towards physical activity. But if they had a safe space to do so, and if they had some beginner exercises that they could do along with the teachers, I think that there's definitely potential for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it has huge impacts on the relationships you build with students. For example, like with the marathon club that we run, I had a student that was less willing to engage, and then he said, well, Mrs. Campbell, you like running. Will you run with me? And I said, of course I will. So we did that together, and that's been something ongoing for the last couple of years with that little guy. So that relationship has continued to grow because of that. And I know in my own classroom, just, when they hear of some of the things I'm doing or the goals I'm setting for myself, they get excited and they want to hear about the things we're doing or I'm doing. So I think that's a great way to build that relationship too. Anytime you can be physical with them, they love it. They light up and they think it's amazing. You're, for me, Mrs. Campbell, you can run? Yeah, I can run, you know? So there's a lot of laughter and fun in it and joy. So.
And for myself, I find I use it as a little opportunity to ask them questions about their personal lives. Like I'll catch up to them on the run and be like, so did you put the crops in yet? Or, you know, are the cows calving? Or like or, you know, there was a little boy in French, I would run beside him. Do you mind if I practice my French with you? And, you know, just finding things that aren't really school related to have conversations about in those moments. And also, you know, I've used it too with other kids where they're having troubles with something, and it's a really great chance to talk about how they felt about that moment while we're out doing something fun. So I'm trying to sort through it that way too.
To all three of you for those answers. Another one sort of related to an earlier question about what you might have wanted to expand on, but just did doing this project and working through this have you thinking about any areas for further research that you might be interested in now?
I guess the question just becomes a little bit like how do not how do we get just teachers, but how do we get society to see that this is important, I guess, and the reasons why it's so important, and what works and what doesn't work, because at the moment it's sort of like the research seemed to suggest that because a lot of the research was about leadership as well, and you know how to be a good leader, and that came out through a lot of those external factors that were shared in the conceptual model, and how that can impact, you know, teacher well-being. But you know, kind of what it suggests is just being a good role model, and role modeling the importance of engaging in physical activity, or showing that you you value it. So then that gives teachers permission to take the time to value it as well. Like you don't have to stay until 7 o'clock at night, you know, doing your schoolwork to be a good teacher. It's also good to go and take care of yourself as well. But I guess I kind of lost where I was going with that. But I think it's just this idea of how do we have people value that, and what can I do to have any influence over that? Or is it just simply that I just continue what I'm doing myself and hope that, you know, hope that maybe that could provide inspiration for, you know, one other person. And if everyone sort of did that and could inspire one other person, then maybe we could have some momentum going. But so yeah, just really trying to, and I know there's lots of research that's been done on motivation and you know, engagement in physical activity, but it's still an area that it seems to be a bit of a mystery, and be interested in knowing more.
Hey, thank you so much for that. I was just a little bit curious about, you know, often with our students, they do research in our classrooms and they find something new and then they're excited for the next part. I appreciate hearing what you might be excited about, especially in that picture of impact, right? That influence and impact in our systems and for our students, because we see the benefits for ourselves and we see the benefits for them. So I appreciate your thoughts on that. I'm going to look towards our question and answer board again to see if there are any other questions waiting for us. Give a couple seconds here in case anyone else would like to answer or ask another question of our panelists. Hey, I'm not seeing anything else popping up in the Q&A. Before we close off this section, we have a comment, just a great project, and a thank you from Ellen for sharing with us. Before we close off this section, is there anything else that any of you found interesting or surprising or anecdotally that you'd just like to share before we close off this section of the evening? A favorite part? I'm sorry, your microphone's off.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking the participants of the chat tonight if they had any favorite parts or comments. Did you guys have anything?
No, I don't really have anything that pops into mind. I'm really proud of Seleste and the work that she's done. This is an area that she's very passionate about, and her drive to share this with others is really inspiring. So I appreciate all of the work that she did.
Thank you. Anything from the other two of you that you'd like to share before we close up for this evening?
I would really just like to express, I guess, my appreciation to the McDowell Foundation for your support along the way and for providing me this opportunity to share this information. I know you guys had put out the published piece as well as offering the session tonight. I just felt like it was my responsibility, I guess, as a researcher to try and share this information. Have done a couple other PD opportunities to get the information out there, but having you guys as a support and basically, you guys are able to reach more people than I'm able to reach on my own. So I do really appreciate that you guys have this foundation and are doing this work and are trying to spread the research for teachers. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing with us and for answering our questions. And I am going to turn it back over to Nicole now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So I just wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to join us tonight. The mission of the McDowell Foundation is to enrich teaching and learning by supporting professionally led research, supporting teachers such as these here with us tonight to ask questions about themselves, their schools, and their profession. And that's why we're here. We are pleased to have been able to provide this space for these conversations and hope that they continue into staff rooms, coffee shop, boardrooms, and all places where decisions and discussions about education are occurring. Thank you to Seleste, Amy, and Ashley for sharing your knowledge and your experience. And thank you, Connie, for moderating tonight. And of course, thank you to Jay for making sure that everything happened and that we didn't run into any tech issues. The McDowell Foundation exists because we believe in the professionalism of teachers and of the need to ensure that good research comes from all of us, not from external places and spaces. Thank you to our many donors, including the STF, that allows us to ensure that teacher voice and teacher experience continue to be led and be at the forefront of these conversations. For more information on any of the McDowell projects or to donate to the foundation, please visit our website, mcdowellfoundation.ca. Thank you and have a great night.